dito, dyan ako sa YouTube.
Cellphone jualan. Kasi tibiret niya lang. Ang ujjang sa
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the webinar series on strategic management, innovation, and leadership in education. Brought to you by the Development Academy of the Philippines. I am Yami D from the DAP Center for Governance, and I will be your moderator for this webinar series. This webinar series aims to discuss the latest trends and approaches in education planning and to acquire a deeper insight on adaptive and collaborative leadership. Before we formally start, allow me first to reiterate some reminders and house rules during this webinar series. All sessions in this webinar are being recorded and broadcasted live via YouTube for documentation purposes. By joining this webinar, you automatically consent to such recordings. For attendance purposes, we would like to request our participants at the Google Meet and at the YouTube channel to please type in your name and agency at the chat box. Please put your microphone on mute to minimize background noises and to avoid disrupting the session. Questions during the session will be relayed using the chat box, so kindly type in your complete name and agency along with your question. Your question shall be responded to during the open forum. For our participants at the Google Meet, we may request you to state your question directly to our speakers. So if you are called, you may unmute yourself and open your camera for the interaction. Lastly, for the presentations, we'll be sending you the link in the email after today's webinar. Before we start with today's lecture, we would like to recognize the senior executives and key personnel from the central, regional, and division offices of the different participating agencies who registered to this webinar series, namely the Department of Education, National Economic and Development Authority, Department of Budget and Management, Commission on Higher Education, Technical Education and Skills Development Authority, Philippine Science High School System, Development Academy of the Philippines, state universities and colleges, and faculty and students from various schools and universities. Thank you for your interest in joining this webinar, and we look forward that you would have a very enlightening session with us. Today's session is entitled Adaptive and Collaborative Leadership and Strategic Foresight Planning in Academic Institutions. When the pandemic occurred, being adaptive and resilient increasingly became important traits, especially among our leaders. It also dawned to many of us that if we had somehow anticipated or predicted this particular event in the future, we may have been more prepared, and the consequences would not be significant. This afternoon, we are privileged to have two distinguished individuals who will deepen our understanding of the concept and characteristics of adaptive and collaborative leadership and of strategic foresight, and how these can be applied and prove beneficial at the context of academic institutions. Our first presenter is the current Dean of the Development Academy of the Philippines Graduate School of Public and Development Management. She is also the President of the Philippine Society for Public Administration and the President of the Philippine Futures Thinking Society. She is a distinguished academic scholar, an international publication awardee, author of books and journals, both local and international, and a resource person in capacity building programs and conferences in the field of public administration. She has enriched her expertise through various educational experiences, including the first knowledge-based management program under the leading education program of the Japan International Cooperation Agency and the National Graduate Research Institute for Policy Studies, and the Leadership Academy for Development of Stanford University in 2015. She recently finished her Futures Masterclass, Foresight to Policy at the National University of Singapore, Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy, and currently she is undergoing training on public policy case writing and case teaching, the trainers workshop organized by the ADB Institute and the Center on Democracy, Development, and the Rule of Law at Stanford University's Leadership Academy for Development. She's an alumna of the University of the Philippines, Diliman, where she finished her master's and doctorate degrees in public administration, and of the University of Negros Occidental Recoletos for her undergraduate degree, where she finished cum laude. To discuss on adaptive and collaborative leadership, we welcome Dr. Lizanne Perante Calino.
Thank you very much, Miriam. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon po.
Magandang
afternoon
po.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon po.
Good afternoon po.
Good afternoon.
Yes,
Good afternoon.
Okay, so it's my privilege to be part of this webinar series entitled Adaptive and Collaborative Leadership and with focus on strategic foresight. So let me share my screen first. Okay, the entire screen. Okay. Okay, so can you see my screen now?
Who registered to this webinar series?
Okay, I think it's, can you see it
Economic
now?
and Health Authority, Department of Budget and Management.
Yes, we can.
Yes, okay, all right. So can I start now?
Philippine Science High School System, Development Academy of the Philippines,
Yeah,
state
Miriam.
universities and colleges,
Yeah,
faculty
Miriam.
and students from foreign and universities.
Miriam.
Yes,
Yeah.
ma'am.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I can hear some recording. So can I start now?
Yes, please, ma'am. Go ahead.
Okay, all right. Sige. So the title is Adaptive and Collaborative Leadership and Strategic Foresight Planning in Academic Institution. But let me begin with this premise that COVID-19 has altered and transformed the education sector's landscape. So what's next, no? And what are those things that we need to focus on? This presentation of mine will basically it hopes to promote a culture of adaptive and collaborative education management and governance to equip and pick the minds of our school-based and non-school-based personnel about the rings of futures leadership and governance. So we have so many features to take into consideration. That's why in futures thinking, there's always S on that, the word feature. And secondly, to provide a practical application of the framework to current and future pandemics. Because we are not only focusing in today's uncertainty, but we also need to be anticipatory. But another question is how to foster an adaptive and collaborative leadership and strategic foresight in academic institutions. So with that, for me, I would like to say that leadership is context-based. There's no one leadership style that we would like to employ in many situations or in complexities. There are so many leadership styles that we can together employ, but I would like to propose that there should be one leadership style that will wrap all leadership styles that we have. But again, leadership is based on context. And with that premise, how will leadership help create our desired future? What future do we like for our education sector? And how will leadership as a tool help us create, not predict? Because in futures thinking, we emphasize that we can only create our future using tools, but it's impossible for us to predict the future. So with that, leadership is imperative, considering that we have so many unknowns and unspoken. Before you is an illustration of futurist metaphorical menagerie. So you have there the black elephant, the black swan, the black jellyfish, and the gray rhino. These are some of the unknowns. And COVID-19 has been considered as the black jellyfish because these are one of the things that we think we know and understand, but which turn out to be more complex and uncertain than we expected. Now, we have that 30 years map, no, for different, no, health hazards, but we have not focused on the impact of this COVID-19 in particular. That's why all jurisdictions around the world were surprised of this COVID-19 global health pandemic. So in leadership, it is very important that we have to take into consideration the unknowns and the unspoken. That's why in futures thinking, I would like, using that futures thinking lens, I would like to pose some questions to all of you. First, what are the implications of COVID-19 to education governance? Secondly, what are the possible, plausible, probable, and preferred features of education? Or we may ask the question, how will the future look like in the next 18 months, in 5 years, in 10, or even in 20 years? Because leadership is really about looking at the strategic direction. It's not only about looking at the day-to-day activities, although we have our managers to do that for us, but for leaders, we really need to be strategic. And to be strategic, we need to use features thinking, tools, and foresight to be anticipatory. If we take a look at the bigger picture as informed by UNESCO, the question is, what will the world look like in 2050, and what role can education play in shaping the future? So this is a bit, a very not really. It's a difficult, no? It's a difficult task that is in front of us. How are we going to shape the education sector, the education system in the next? Now is 2020 plus 30 years. In the next 30 years for 2050, do we need to really collaborate? And in collaboration, what are we going to do? What strategies that we need to take into consideration for us to shape the future that we want for the education sector? So that's one thing that this webinar will somehow inspire us, and give us some tools on how to do this, and on how to build scenarios for 2050 for the education sector. And that is why leadership matters, because we need to consider weak signals, wild cards, and what I mentioned earlier, the unspoken and the unknowns. Okay, so now is the time, now is the right time, now is the high time for us to really formulate strategies, because we are in a tuna world, according to Skoblik. It's about turbulence, uncertainties, novelties, and ambiguity. So with that, for UNESCO, for OECD, and for World Economic Forum, they prescribe that we need to have set skills, and we need to have competencies. And what are these competencies in the 21st century? This include features thinking, foresight, anticipation, systems thinking, and leadership. But what type of leadership in particular are we going to employ? As I mentioned earlier, leadership is based on context. So it will really depend on the leaders what type of leadership we want, what type or leadership style we are going to employ in this in a particular situation. So before we delve into the meat of the matter, I'd like you to visit first www.menti.com. Just answer this question: what comes to mind when you think of adaptive and collaborative leadership? Okay, so I'll share my screen for that one, and you have to enter this code. I'll give you a few minutes to do that. Okay, so if you are now in your laptop there, kindly encode www.menti.com and then use the code 8842821. So your answer will appear in that screen. All right? I assume lahat naman naka-laptop tayo, ano? And even sa cell phone, I think you can also access www.menti.com. Okay, so are you there? You can just unmute your microphone. Very good. Wow. So we have here resilient, cooperative, networking. Okay, so when we think of adaptive and collaborative leadership, it's about resilient, flexible management, suspend judgment, okay, teamwork, strategic, mind shift, right? Wow, we're receiving good answers here. Process of change, co-creator, yes. Okay, togetherness, all right. openness, synergy. No? Synergy, 1 plus 1 equals 3. Huh? Okay. Cooperation, integrated, all right, flexible. Flexible is now the biggest word here, meaning to say there are a number of attendees who answered flexible, and also resilient. Now, cooperation is also getting bigger, the word cooperation. Teamwork, it's there. So in teamwork, there's no I, but we. No? Innovative, okay. Willing to adopt, all right. Very, what else? Shared, okay. Wow, agile, automation, okay. Oneness, willing to accept change, it's there. Now, inclusive, flexible management, resilience, prognostic, okay, communication, consensus building, positivity, right? Goal-oriented, okay. We have around 90 co-learners entering their answers for this. This is real time. This is good. While others are still entering their answers, I just like to ask one participant about this. Let me choose first, okay? Yeah, systems thinker. Who answered systems thinker? Just unmute your microphone. Systems thinker. Systems thinker, who did that? Can you share to us your idea, your thoughts about it? Systems thinker. From 250 participants. Anyone? Okay. Well, I think Laila, teamwork. Ma'am Laila, would you like to share your idea about teamwork? Just unmute your microphone.
Okay, hello, good afternoon.
Yes, ma'am. Good afternoon. Can you share to us about your answer, which is teamwork, very briefly, ma'am?
Okay, when we say teamwork, more heads, there's a saying that more heads are better than one. So the ideas of the teachers are important for the school head to form the greatest decision or the right decision for the organization.
Yeah, so it's better to have everyone contribute their ideas.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, thank you for that. And it's also it's all about ownership, no? When you contribute something, you have ownership to that reform, no, or to that policy or to that activity. Okay, one more. While waiting for other participants to enter their answer, I'd like to hear from a participant who mentioned about shared leadership, about shared leadership. Yes. Shared leadership. Yeah. Any thoughts or ideas about shared leadership? This is interesting. Labeled as shared leadership, sometimes some authors label that as distributive leadership. No? But I'd like to hear from our participant who answered shared. Any ideas for this? Okay, just unmute your microphone. Or anyone who would like to volunteer, because there are around 251 of us here in this platform. Anyone who would like to say something? Flexible leadership. Yes, ma'am. Arceli Lopez. Flexible leadership, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. Good afternoon. The ability to adapt, the ability to adjust, whatever the surrounding circumstances, can be able to adapt.
Yes, the ability to be flexible and adapt depending on the situation. So thank you for that. I think we got a number of answers here already. It's 135. This is a very good reflection of being adaptive and being collaborative. So let me unshare my screen now, but you can still enter your thoughts and ideas about the question I posed earlier. So can you still see my presentation? Okay. So with that, I received a number of ideas from you about adaptive and collaborative leadership. I'd like to show you also the framework introduced by Hafetz. It's adaptive leadership framework. This was coined, or this was created for organizations to thrive amidst uncertain change. And this topic is very timely and it's very relevant, no? To really pick our minds on what are we going to do, no? This pandemic, and of course, and beyond. No? How are we going to set a strategic direction for the education sector? And this framework also is really about understanding human behavior and mobilizing them to produce meaningful progress or meaningful activities, programs, and projects. But the key point there is really for them to bring change in the world. And what is that change all about? No? The change, I suppose, is really for the common good. For the public sector, it's about public good, no? It's about public service. It's about public interest, no? As differentiated from private interest. No? So that's my my take on the adaptive leadership of Hafetz, and I would like to relate that to the framework, which is the Rings of Futures Leadership and Governance. So in this framework, we have 4 key areas there, or 4 elements. First, futures thinking. Second is foresight. You'll be discussing that later on with Professor Sherman. Knowledge co-creation. And this knowledge co-creation will lead us to innovation, no? Social innovation and agility in an organization. And the last one, which will wrap all these skills, no, and competencies, is the frenetic leadership. The frenetic leadership, I believe you have an idea already about frenetic leadership. And I would like to emphasize that frenetic leadership, based on our experience, was contextualized based on our culture, no? Based on our values, and based on our motto. And for frenetic leadership, as informed by Professor Nanaka, there are 6 abilities that we have to take into consideration. Frenetic leadership is also known as wise leadership or ethical leadership. And with that, we need to harmonize the 6 abilities to our vision. And our vision, as articulated in the 1987 Constitution, is to build a just and humane society, anchored also on our motto. Our motto is makadiyos, makatao, makakalikasan, at makabansa. And further, we incorporated the Filipino values: bayanihan, balikatan, malasakit, galang, ugnayan, and pananagutan. The concept of malasakit is reflected in our Philippine Development Plan, no? In order for us to curb bureaucratic red tape and corruption. So this Rings of Futures Leadership and Governance is a composite of other frameworks that we introduced in the Philippine bureaucracy and also in the academe. No? So I will focus on frenetic leadership and its values being the core, or the fulcrum or stabilizer of change, no? Especially during pandemic. And as you can see in your slide, you have there explicit knowledge, no? And tacit knowledge. Then you have ba. Ba is about organizing small groups, no? Sharing the same context. Then you have their kata, or creative routine. Then dialogue and practice towards common good. It's pointing to common good. And for the next an hour, you will hear a lot of words on common good, no, general welfare, and goodness, because this is really the essence of a frenetic leadership. So, according to Nanaka, knowledge is the only meaningful resource today, especially in the 21st century. Knowledge is considered as the new oil. Knowledge is the only unlimited resource, meaning to say that knowledge is unlimited compared to other resources like money, property, and even power. But then that knowledge should be co-created. It should be shared, with our teammates, with our other co-learners and with our other officials, not only in the academe but also in the entire bureaucracy, Philippine government. And in connection with that knowledge, I'd like to quote Tony Miloto. He mentioned that my power lies in not desiring power, because when he introduced an innovation, it was through knowledge co-creation. And he said that a leadership that does not seek power in the process becomes more powerful. So he is looking not to the position or not to the designation that he will acquire, but on the common good. The common good, or the goodness that he wants to share with the common tao. And with that, Tony Miloto was able to introduce a social innovation tool. And that social innovation is the so-called Gawad Kalinga. Okay. For the frenetic leadership, because Tony Miloto is one of our frenetic leaders, and we made a case study for him, anchored on this framework introduced by Professor Ikujiro Nunaka. And he mentioned in one article that his ambition was to develop a new original made in Japan theory rather than borrowing theories from elsewhere. So that's why he was able to craft this frenetic leadership, wherein he shared this to scholars and practitioners in Asia. And Philippines is one of the recipients of this frenetic leadership. And we have already cascaded this one. And that frenetic leadership is anchored on Aristotelian doctrine. It is one of the types of knowledge which we call phronesis, or practical wisdom. The other two include episteme or episteme, explicit or scientific knowledge, and techne. It's about technological know-how and type of a tacit knowledge. So phronesis is basically about an intellectual virtue that enables best judgments and actions in particular situation. It means it is about the practical wisdom. And what is this practical wisdom? The practical wisdom is the right to choose, the right course of action in complex situations. Sometimes as a leader, I guess you will also, you have observed that as well, that you have this aha moment. And aside from that aha moment, you also employ widow. In one of our cases, which is the case of Philippine National Statistics Office, now the Philippine Statistical Authority, our frenetic leader or our protagonist there is Mr. Butcha Africa. And he used widow as a management and leadership tool in order to introduce reforms in that organization. So why practical wisdom important in adaptive and collaborative leadership, as well as in strategic foresight? Why practical wisdom? Because practical wisdom is the right, it is the right to differentiate what is really good, based on our kamantayan, based on our code, based on our culture, based on our values. And this practical wisdom is about our experience. So it's about experiential knowledge that facilitates individuals to make ethically sound decisions. Earlier, I mentioned that frenetic leadership is equivalent to ethical or wise leadership. That's why you have this word, ethically sound decisions. And that practical wisdom is based on your experience. And ang sabi nga sa mga matatanda, sa mga bata, kayo ay papunta pa lang, kami pauwi na. Which means that practical wisdom is a key ingredient in frenetic leadership, because only through that practical wisdom that you can make an ethical and sound decisions. And it is also a virtuous habits of making decisions and taking actions that serve the common good. And what is that common good all about? What is that common good all about? In our Constitution, it is articulated there that it's our vision to build a just and humane society anchored on our values. So naka-enumerate din doon yung mga values in our 1987 Constitution. And another thing that this framework emphasizes is the toku. It's a Japanese word, which means the virtue that helps a person to take up common good and moral excellence as a way of life. What I'm going to emphasize here is that while we have this management and leadership tools that we use in our offices, we have to provide also it's the practical application of these tools where we can use that in our everyday activities. That's how Japanese do that. No? Like, for example, they have this Kaizen. Kaizen, you all know this, no? It's a continuous improvement in an organization. In that particular framework, they provided practical tools wherein an individual can use that in his everyday life. So it's really about taking up common good, no, and moral excellence as a way of life. So it's not only the management and leadership tools that we are using in our office should also be used in our daily activities, ordinarily, as an ordinary person. So practical wisdom is really about making the right decisions, taking right actions in a complex situation with values and ethics that serve the common good and the capability to find a right answer in a particular context. But what makes frenetic leadership dynamic? To become adaptive and collaborative. So this is the framework. It's a bit complex, but if you take a look at it, it's very simple. No? It's about converting tacit to explicit knowledge. It's about getting experience, socialization, immersion, perceiving reality as it is. And then from that experience, you have to articulate that tacit knowledge or experience through dialogue and reflection. So like, for example, if you happen to observe one best practice in one community or in one educational institution, for example, and you want to use that also in your school, then you can convert the tacit knowledge of yours into an explicit knowledge. You have to now make a concept note. Articulate tacit knowledge using symbolic language and translate tacit knowledge into a concept or prototype. And from that explicit knowledge, you have to further convert that to explicit knowledge. And that is systemizing and applying explicit knowledge and information. And from that explicit, again, you have to go again, make another observation, make another socialization, and that is internalization, embodying explicit knowledge through action and reflection using simulation and experiments. So as you can see here, we have a spiral figure. It means that it's a never-ending creation of knowledge, co-creation of knowledge in the community. It will not stop because once nag-stop siya, then innovation will not be introduced in an organization. So it's really about the socialization of individual, bringing it to the group, bringing it to the organization, then bringing it to the community. And from community, again, you have to go back to that socialization part. So that's the dynamic description of practical wisdom in frenetic leadership using SECI model, wherein you co-create knowledge with the individual, with your organization, and with the community. Another explanation of tacit and explicit knowledge is this one. So tacit knowledge is really about subjective and implicit knowledge that cannot be expressed in words. But you need to convert that to explicit knowledge. And if you mix this together, tacit and explicit knowledge, the result is new knowledge. There is knowledge co-creation for that matter. That's why with the use of tacit and explicit knowledge, practical wisdom is there to guide us in our leadership direction and in our leadership decisions. Another powerful illustration of tacit and explicit knowledge is the Fresco of Rafael. It is the School of Athens. Here we have so many philosophers and teachers. You can Google search this one. There is a corresponding number identifying all these philosophers. But what's important there And how we explain tacit is because Plato is pointing to the sky, and while Aristotle to the ground or the earth. And Plato's gesture represents his deductive idealism, or he said that it's the universal quality resides in ultimate forms or ideas, and that is about explicit knowledge. While Aristotle's gesture represents his inductive pragmatism, realizing that universal quality resides here on earth and can only be perceptible through our five senses. Another simple illustration of tacit and explicit knowledge is the tip of the iceberg theory. So as you can see here, explicit knowledge is visible above water, while tacit knowledge spreads deep, wide underwater. This is very important because in your next session, which is strategic foresight, you will be using your tacit knowledge in order to create scenarios that would lead to common good. So with that, how do we exemplify frenetic leadership as a pillar in promoting adaptive and collaborative leadership with the use of strategic foresight? So we have to take into consideration the 6 abilities of a frenetic leader. So very briefly, I would like to share with you what are these 6 abilities all about, and later related to the cases that we wrote for the Philippines, and also the cases that our co-authors and colleagues in Asia wrote for their country as a basis of our case methodology approach in some universities. So first is the ability to set a good goal and make judgment on goodness. According to Mother Princess of Thailand, everyone wants to be good, only that sometimes there's no opportunity to be a good person. But basically, the ability to set a good goal and make judgment on goodness is the ability of a leader to discern what is good. Pursue goodness in all situations, always in good faith, and guided by values and ethics, and reflect deeply about how much values relate to and impact a society. Number 2 is the ability to perceive reality as it is. So you have the ability to quickly grasp the essence of any situation or a problem, and intuitively, one understand the nature. This is very important. Understanding the nature and meaning of people, things, and events. This is important in practical wisdom. Third is the ability to create Ba. Ba is about creating a space, creating a platform for wherein we can gather together to share our common goals, our shared vision. In management, we call this as CLIQUE, CLIQUE. This is forming an informal organizations within a formal organization. So we need that to be candid about what's happening, to discuss in an informal way what are some of the things that we need to consider in our organization. So that's very important. Number 4 is the ability to articulate the essence into narratives. That's another ability of a leader, not really of a frenetic leader, but of a leader. Ability to grasp the essence, conceptualize, and create. This is really the capacity to articulate the essence behind phenomena and context into narratives. And narratives are very important in foresight and futures thinking. 5th is the ability to exercise political power to achieve an envisioned story. This is about bringing people together into one common platform, even though they have conflicting goals, and spur them into action, and prompt them to take action. This is very important in order for us to introduce strategic direction in an organization. And lastly, of course, is seeing goodness in others. That is about fostering phronesis in others. You have to build an organization that is resilient, adaptive, and while it's being resilient and adaptive, it should be collaborative. And it is only through phronesis, in seeing goodness in others, that you can collaborate without considering all other issues and concerns that will divide the group. So in collaboration, it's important that you have this common vision, you have this shared values, in order for you to arrive in that strategic direction that you want for your organization. So these are the 6 abilities of a frenetic leader. And considering the principles of a frenetic leader and Seki model, now how do you promote adaptive and collaborative leadership and strategic foresight in your organization? So that's one question that is it's a bit hard, no? It's a bit hard to do, but if you have the tools, you have the competencies, and you have the skills of the 21st century, then maybe we can readily adapt, no? In this crisis that we are facing. But we have to take into consideration some key drivers, and one of the key drivers and the sub-drivers here include transforming people's activities and mindsets. In any platform that we've attended, changing mindset is very important. Even the United Nations informed that changing mindset is important in an organization. If you want to shift to digital platform, you also have to change the mindset, not only of the students, but also of the professors, and also the learning management team. So that's very important. It's not only about technology. It's not only about technology, but it's about how to use that technology in order to improve the system. So in transforming people's activities and mindset, we have to consider key drivers. We have to look at, again, our vision and our commitment to the goals. Here, there is an accumulation of high-quality tacit knowledge gained from a variety of experiences in the past. And this is about relentless pursuit of excellence. Secondly, knowledge creating process in transformational management. This is about socialization. Later on, in some cases that I will present to you, you will see the socialization aspect, how some of our leaders operationalize socialization. And the next one is exercising political power and distributing wise leadership. And this is about mentoring, this is about coaching, and this is about empowerment. So distributive leadership, as we call it. So in exercising phronesis, when we decide what action to take, we do not deductively follow a given principle to specific outcome, but rather we begin with intention. And that from intention, we try to harmonize that with our objective and with current situation. So we maintain balance all the time in exercising phronesis. And that decision must always be towards the common good. But how does one sustain and increase the energy that drives knowledge creating activities in an organization, and by what methods? Well, basically, the answer is there are guidelines, but there is no manual in which the practice is standardized because there is no single approach. But the key element there is knowledge creation, because knowledge creation is a dynamic process unique to each situation and in continuous change. So when you do knowledge co-creation, you will become adaptive, you will become collaborative, you will become innovative, and your organization will become agile. That's why in frenetic leadership, knowledge co-creation is one of the key elements that really drive frenetic leadership. In one case, for example, this is the case of Toyota, and according to Toyota, doing the right things when required is calling from on high. Do it boldly, do as you believe, do as you are. And as you can see in this framework, you have the philosophy there. It says long-term thinking, but they consider Kaizen. Kaizen, respect plus teamwork, and of course the other factors, people and partners. And here he mentioned that leaders will continue to rely on new scientific discoveries, new tools, new smarter systems, but creating the future, however, must extend beyond the company. It must be about pursuing the common good. And in the book of Nonaka and Takeuchi, which is about wise management, or the WISE company here, if we can see this one, here it states that organizations must take a look at the CSV, creating shared value. Creating shared value is higher than corporate social responsibility. In CSV, you are looking at the value or the societal purpose of your organization. And by looking at the societal purpose of your organization, you are helping the community resolve some pressing issues. So this is the concept, or this is the key area that Toyota wants to focus, or that they have focused already on that. No? So it must be about pursuing the common good. So another case study, which we can mind stretch our routines, and we usually practice this. One is the relentlessly asking, what is the basis of a problem or situation. So at Toyota, employees ask the question why 5 times to get the root cause. That's for Toyota. For Honda, they ask the question AOO questions. A questions are about specifications. AO are about concepts, and AOO are about the essential goals of the project. So in strategic foresight, in leadership, it's important that you really have to relevantly ask questions. Now, what is the basis of the problem, or what is the situation? Actually, it's an everyday thing to do. And my professor in strategic foresight mentioned that you have to check every day your small gains. No, what are your successes? No, you have to check on that, and what are the things that you need to focus on. So it's a review. Every day is a review, not an annual review. Usually, what we do in strategic planning, we do it annually. No? So the review is an annual thing to do. But for strategic foresight, according to our professors, it must be every day, everyday activity, asking the questions, or asking what are the problems, no, or the root cause of the situation. Okay. Another is learning to see the trees and forest at the same time. This is from the case of 7-Eleven. Now I'm presenting to you cases. No, we have so many questions. Sorry, I'll entertain that later. In the words of Suzuki, he is the 7-Eleven Japan's chairman. He said that it isn't good if you just see a tree, not the forest. Many wrongly think that single item management means managing a single item, but it is necessary to place the item in the store as a whole. So you have to take a look at the bigger, always actually take a look at the bigger picture that is being strategic. No? So that's one of the exercises that can really stretch our mind, no, in leadership. So again, the 6 abilities of a frenetic leaders focus on common good. No? Wise leaders make decisions only after they figure out what is good for the organization and society. And what's important there is they encourage the development of practical wisdom in others, especially employees on front lines, through apprenticeship and mentoring. And through apprenticeship and mentoring, you are also transferring technology here. You transfer I'm speaking of technology as part of knowledge management. You transfer the knowledge of the senior members of the organization to the middle manager, then down to the lower level. So that is to avoid leadership vacuum. Okay, so it's important also to note that we, as adaptive and collaborative leaders, we have to take a look at innovation. Innovation in an organization doesn't mean technological innovation, no? But it's really about knowledge innovation. Now, knowledge innovation that would lead to social or technical innovation. Like for example, at the graduate school, here at DAP, we have this one platform which we call Knowledge Innovation Hub Lab. hub and laboratory. So KI Hub Lab. So that knowledge innovation platform is a platform that harmonize or integrates all our public management initiatives. We have their future studies, we have their frenetic leadership, and among others. So what's the role of leaders towards innovation? First, challenge a good objective. Set vision with moral and ethical values towards a common good while in action. I know that setting a vision is very hard. This is the hardest thing to do in an organization, especially if you are new in that organization. Then observe reality. So grasp the essence behind the reality. Create ba. So the same thing with the 6 abilities. Articulate a narrative, maneuver the objective, and foster frenesis. By fostering frenesis, you will be able to nurture organizational resiliency and sustainability. One of the key concepts that have been fleshed out earlier during our Menti session. But what is innovation? Innovation is a new value or new way to deliver value that contributes to the society and make continuous growth possible. And this innovation is again towards common good. But there's another definition of innovation which refers to commercial or industrial combination of something new. But again, in innovation, the key point or the key element there is knowledge co-creation, because knowledge is a dynamic process or dynamic social process of justifying personal belief towards goodness and beauty, according to Nanaka and Takeuchi. So in line with this frenetic leadership, as we operationalize the framework in the Philippines, we conducted a survey of state university and college presidents on the leadership in the academia. And we surveyed together with Dr. Alex Brillantes, and this study was published by Emerald Insight publication. It's entitled Leadership and Public Sector Reform in Asia. There's one chapter on Philippines, leadership and public sector reform in Asia, leadership and public sector reform in the Philippines case. So this survey was conducted sometime in 2018, and we surveyed 31 presidents of public higher education institutions, and we were able to draw insights from them at the hem of public institutions seeking to implement much needed reforms in their SUCs, in their state universities and colleges. And the survey is entitled Innovations and Excellence, Leadership and Public Sector. So there were 10 short set of 10 questions on 2 aspects. First, aspects of leadership, and the other one is on the general organization and management. So what are the questions on the aspects of leadership that they responded? First, what would you consider among your outstanding accomplishments as a leader so far? Later on, I'll show you just a brief answer from our colleges, from our state universities and colleges presidents. Second, what are the biggest challenges you encountered and how did you handle those challenges? And what are the factors behind the success of your leadership and the qualifications needed to become an effective leader? And based on your experience, what would you consider are the qualifications needed to become an effective leader? On the aspects of organization and management in general, these are some of the questions that we gave them. What reforms or innovations did you introduce upon assumption of office and during your incumbency? And what could best explain the success of the reform you introduced in your organization? And lastly, of course, is how do you ensure the continuity of your reform in the future? This question is very important because this will somehow show your leadership style on how you will sustain the gains introduced by the previous administration. So you will see your leadership skills in sustaining the gains. And very briefly, I'd like to share with you some of the answers of our SUC president leaders. in their accomplishments, they mentioned about enabling mechanisms have been improved, on interpersonal and working relationships, proper placement of personnel, empowering faculty and staff, and career development. So there's a tie-up between industry and community, and then community, university, and LGU. No? And of course, they recommended for training, and a corresponding promotion. And the second one that they emphasize is really about changing the values and behaviors of faculty, staff, and employees, because you need that to transform universities. In leadership, changing mindset is one of the most difficult things to do, because changing mindset is a process. But the question is, when are you going to start to change the mindsets of the people? So that's the other thing that they emphasize about changing values and behaviors. And later on, I'll show you the framework that incorporates values, changing values, and mindset. Another question is on the factors behind successful leadership and qualifications needed to become an effective leader. And the answer is leadership by example, and communication leads to successful leadership, but knowledge, skills, expertise, and experience are key ingredients in attaining success and efficiency in an organization. So again, leadership by example. But what type of leadership would you like to employ in that kind of situation? So they did not mention about it because we did not ask, but leadership by example and communication are two things that would really introduce the organization into a successful one. So far, those are the questions, and I will share to you later on the article that we have with Dr. Alex, for you to read, and well, maybe that will serve as an inspiration for all of you, because that is not only about public sector reform, leadership, and governance in the academia, but it's about the entire Philippine bureaucracy. And since the survey was on innovation and excellence, I would like to introduce also to you the mono-thinking to auto-thinking. We learned this in Japan, and it is about thinking in verb, not in noun. For example, you have a product which is iPod. iPod is a mono, or is a noun, wherein you have to really take a look if there's value on that product. But if you have to consider this thinking in verb, you have to add software, wherein you can easily download music, you can easily classify, manage, depending on the genre that you want, maybe, I don't know, the genre here, maybe classical, classic songs, or OPM. So that's one thing that you can consider, thinking in a verb and not in noun. Another example is the staircase. Of course, we have the ordinary staircase, that's monothinking. If you do cotothinking, you develop an elevator, you develop a lift, you develop an escalator. In Malaysia, I saw this one, while they have this ordinary staircase, they incorporated a lift for stroller, for those couples with a baby, wherein they can put their stroller in that lift just beside them. Because what we usually do is the husband and wife will bring the stroller going down using the staircase if there's no elevator. So that's again cotothinking. Another example is this RCEP jelly. This is based on the case study that they conducted in Japan, which it's very hard to administer a tablet or a capsule. So they develop a RCEP jelly. You just have to administer that by putting it at the top of the tip of your tongue, and then it will just melt. So it's very easy, RCEP jelly. And of course, the chair, designing a chair. Now you have an ordinary chair. Now, right, we have chairs that we can adjust with rollers. Usually in the office Sometimes we don't stand up anymore. We just use our chairs to go to one table, no, and to another table. That's really about sedentary lifestyle because of the rollers provided there in that chair, no. So those are the things that you can consider in introducing innovations. Think in verb, not in noun. And within the Philippine context, using and operationalizing frenetic leadership, we introduced a number of cases. Now, there are around 4 cases that have been published, and we have additional 3 cases that we're about to publish and share to the public. So first is about creating the Census Horribilis, a study of the Philippines National Statistics Office. And that is now the Philippine Statistics Authority. Then we also have the case of Mayor Belmonte and Quezon City. Antonio Meloto, this is about empowering the Filipino people towards sustainable and innovative communities. And the one that really harmonized and unified all cases, we have, we have the so-called the knowledge-based public sector reform, the Philippine experience. I can share the articles with you later on. Okay, so here are some of the emerging principles and processes from those 3 cases and from the other cases that our co-authors and colleagues in Asia shared with us. So the frenetic leader has a vision for the common good of the community. Secondly, the frenetic leader has some inherent goodness rooted in integrity, humility, compassion, and selflessness. And that is emphasized in the case of Tony Miloto, wherein he mentioned that my power comes from not desiring power. And also from the case of Joko Widodo. And another emerging principle is that frenetic leader plays multiple and sometimes conflicting roles and has to reconcile these roles, no, as a regulator and an enabler. We work within rigid rules, but then we have to be flexible. We can be transformational, yet maybe transactional, no? Must be neutral, yet must make a stand. That's why leadership is really based on context. Another principle is frenetic leader develops and builds partnerships and coalitions. So this is really about collaborative, this is really about collaboration, no? And this collaboration partnership thing was seen in the cases of Mayor Belmonte of Thailand, no? Thailand, Dr. Swang Wan, wherein he introduced the mountain triangle triangle framework in healthcare. No? Another emerging principle is the frenetic leader lives with the people and fosters ownership of reforms among the people. And this is about immersion. This is about socialization. This is about acting like them. No? Like in the case of Joko Widodo, he introduced the term blusukan. This is his leadership style, wherein he really collaborates with people. And in this case, he treated street vendors like human beings. No? Instead of exercising force and intimidation, he introduced a different leadership style in that case. Now, I cannot share that with you right now because of limited time, but I can share the article again. And here, as a leader, you have to promote, participation of multi-stakeholders, and it is also about inclusive leadership, so that at the end of the day, they will say that they have an ownership to the reforms introduced in an organization. 6 is mentoring young leaders. This is very important. As I mentioned earlier, the transfer of technology from senior to middle and then to the lower level. If you mentor younger leaders, you are creating a community of futurists, no, a community of foresight practitioners, a community of frenetic leaders. No? That's very important in seeing goodness in others. Seeing goodness in others means mentoring the younger leaders. And if you mentor younger leaders, you are promoting the intergenerational responsibility doctrine, wherein you care now for the next generation. Another emerging principle is that frenetic leader is a reformer and risk taker. This is very important. Now, if you will not take the risk, then you will not be able to introduce reforms and innovations in an organization. Another important thing is the continuous re-examination and self-examination. As a leader, it is a must that we have to continuously study, gain experience, learn best practices from other countries, from other colleagues, from other friends. Now, so continuous re-examination and self-examination, we have to examine ourselves. What are my strengths? But what are also my weaknesses? Now, by really looking at your weaknesses, you'll be able to self-reflect that, okay, as a leader, I need this and that. And if I can't really do this, I have other colleagues who can do this. There are other experts who can help me in doing this. So this principle is evident in one of the cases, like the case of Vietnam, regular self-reflection. Another is on a frenetic leader's power maybe in his or special skills. Now, technocrat, wherein he uses technologies in information and communication to address challenges. And this is one thing that Thomas Africa and Erita of then NSO introduced. So imagine right now we are beneficiaries of that very streamlined processes and procedures in getting our civil registry documents. It's so easy now to get those documents compared in the past decade that we have to take a queue at the NSO, now PSA. And then frenetic leader is relentless in his pursuit of changes and reforms. So continuous innovation. Okay. And frenetic leader sustains and builds upon earlier gains. This is one important thing that I mentioned earlier. And of course, frenetic leader co-creates knowledge with other sectors. And I just want to mention this case in Thailand, wherein in one of the communities in Thailand, it's somewhere between the boundary of Thailand and Myanmar. There's Doi Tung Mountain there, and the only livelihood of the residents there are on human trafficking, drug trafficking, and arms trafficking. So imagine, they don't have a quality of life. So what Mother Princess and other leaders did, they transformed that community, and that's really about seeing goodness in others. And there's there is this platform that everyone can be part of community building. Okay, I have I think my time is over, but I'll just want to go through this one. Now again, on the rings of features, Miriam, I'm still okay? No?
Yes, ma'am, you're still okay.
Okay, all right. So futures thinking actually has been a concern over the past many decades. It's not new. And in the Philippines, we have a number of local efforts. And right now, we are sustaining the gains by building a community of futurists. That's why we have this Philippine Futures Thinking Society, which later on Sherman will discuss that with you. And futures thinking is not about predicting the future, but rather it's about imagining multiple futures in creative ways. It's really about improving our senses, shaping our minds, and we need to adapt to what is happening right now and plan for the future. And that is futures thinking and foresight. It's really an approach to identifying long-term issues towards common good. And I would like to share with you this literature from UNESCO. While we are facing accelerated climate change, rise of artificial intelligence, and so on and so forth, wherein we, as human beings, we face common challenges, we need to be agile as well. And what UNESCO is trying to project is that we really have to look at the future, like in 2050, 2050, for example, what role can education play in shaping the future? We need, according to UNESCO, we need to reimagine knowledge, education, and learning in this tuna world. And by rethinking education and learning, we are looking into these two aspects: humanistic approach to education and development, and that approach is grounded in a vision of development. And that vision of development is really about what? Really about our the reaffirmation of our common core of universally shared values. And that shared values is really about for the future generation. All right. And another important thing that maybe can also serve as an inspiration for all of you is this one. They emphasize this, that learning leadership in schools rather than school management. Learning resources and learning environments rather than educational, finance, or school equipment. Teachers as professionals of learning rather than as teaching force. So it's really about mind setting. And also they emphasize that tests and examinations as assessments for learning rather than assessment of learning. In one of our presentations in the Senate committee, Peter Bishop emphasized that in teaching history, it must be treated as a tool on how to make decisions in the now. So it's not usually we teach history as a boring subject matter because we don't use it as a tool to make decision. So there's a way on how to do that, and technologies as a means of liberating learners rather than as a way of replacing teachers. And we have, we are so afraid because technology, we have AI, Internet of Things, that would sometime in the future replace human beings in our tasks. But no, technologies are there as a means of liberating learners. And in May 21, 2020, there was a Senate Resolution number 413, whereas Features Think allows for a systematic assessment of the education system and the development of strategic responses towards the effective delivery of education in light of the new normal, while enabling new competencies in teaching, establishing collaborations, and facilitating technology and innovation. So we were asked to make a response on this, and our response is really about developing new competencies in teaching, establishing international collaboration, and facilitating green technology and innovation. And this is the framework that we shared before the Senate Committee on SDGs, Features, Innovations, and Features Thinking. It's really about green education, integrating the 17 SDGs there, wherein we can use strategic foresight framework and green education system to promote intergenerational responsibility. And this one, earlier on, we presented this also before the Senate committee, and we integrated that foresight framework here in the green education system. And of course, aside from that, we have to take into consideration the changing of mindset. I mentioned this many times, and I think this is very important because we are imprisoned by fear of change, innovation, and risk. And how are we going to really push for a regenerative and indigenous kind of system? We need to embed culture, values, ethics, and nature in order for us to nurture the intergenerational responsibility doctrine. And also we incorporated this governance reform framework to that framework, wherein we have 5 key areas here about institutions, mindsets, leadership, citizen engagement, and communication with our Filipino values. And the approach there is really whole of nation approach. But what if COVID-19 starts to become normal? That's another question. And I would like to quote my mentor here, Dr. Anita Sykes. We might want to look at that in the context of how do we live with it while innovating and creating things. So we need, while we are here, we need to move forward really, no? And how will COVID-19 change our future? So there are so many reasons not to change, but change anyway, no? As we mentioned, that's easier. No, we need to adapt. We need to be resilient, and of course, we need to be collaborative, no? And change takes time, and really, no, it's not easy. No, it's not easy. But we need to change. No, we need to be smart. No, we have smart technology, smart home, smart agriculture, no, smart city, smart infrastructure. But most of all, we need to have smart people. And how do we do that? It's really about continuous learning, no? Because learning is a scalar process. And by continuously learning, we will be able to no, introduce agility and innovations in our organization and lead the change, no, to become adaptive and collaborative. So leading the change really is about create, no, a sense of urgency. And by creating a sense of urgency, we are looking into this, no? We need to activate, accelerate, achieve, and assess the situation. Number two is we need to form a powerful guiding coalition. This is about creating assemble a group with enough power to lead the change effort. No? Then develop the change vision, no? Setting the goals and develop strategies and help direct the change effort. Then step 4 is communicate the vision. Use all avenues to generate buy-in and model new behaviors. Leading the change is also about empowering others to act. And it is there in one of the 6 abilities of a frenetic leader. But of course, we need to plan and create short-term wins. No? Plan for visible improvements, recognize and reward employees. This is one important thing in behavioral organization. No? We need to motivate, no, workers. But of course, the monetary value is not enough. We need to belong. No? The sense of belongingness is very important. Don't let up. No, we need to consolidate improvements and produce more change. And by producing more change, we need to institutionalize. Sustaining the gains, institutionalize new approaches, anchor change in the new culture, and develop successor generation. That is empowerment. No? And with all those things, we can cluster that into 3. No? So first is really about creating a climate for change. No? Second cluster is enabling the whole organization. And the third cluster is about implementing and sustaining change. So that's really being adaptive, no, and collaborative. But we have to take into consideration this one. What are the tools for changing minds? No? I think the important thing is really leadership, no? The highest form. No? Using leadership tools, we can inspire people. No, we can inspire our team to lead change. That is why leadership matters. And traditionally, the leadership is created and delivered by one person. But today, not tomorrow, more organizations see leadership as a function of a group working collaboratively. And to get the most out of the expertise, we need different leadership skills and behavior than before. So you can provide, no, you can introduce your own leadership style, composite leadership style, by incorporating all other leadership styles that you have learned, no, from based on your experience and based on your training. No? And these are the actors, no, that we have to consider in governance. By working collaboratively, we need to deal with the business sector, we need to deal with the civil society organizations and all other actors in the community. And by promoting adaptive and collaborative mechanisms, we need also to look into the major characteristics of good governance, which include transparency, accountability, responsiveness, rule of law, and participation. And of course, our favorite, no? Si Peter Drucker, a management guru, he mentioned that leading changes is about creating future. I would like to add S for this one. So leading changes is about creating features. Now, and to make the feature is highly risky, but it is expensive if we will not do that features thinking scenario building. So it's very important that we have that competencies. No? So our framework for public sector reform and adaptive leadership, non-collaborative one, is the rings of futures leadership and governance, which incorporated all other frameworks: the governance reform framework, the strategic foresight framework, no, and the green education framework. But then I would like to share with you the main message really, no, about leadership. So leadership does matter, and practical wisdom is very important. But we have to be inclusive. No, we have to be inclusive, and we have to be sensitive to the needs of our communities. We can use our widow, no, or some kind of sixth sense that knows what is goodness. Leaders are risk takers. No, leaders are political animals. We are sensitive to realities of struggle, but also we need to develop other leaders. No, that's mentoring, and leaders develop capacities of themselves and of others. And leadership means lifelong learning. However, leadership is not enough. In order to sustain that, no, sustain reforms and introduce innovations and agility in the organization, we have to consider other factors: values, culture, the structures, the procedures, and also we have to incorporate ethics, our Filipino values. And not only that, also the essential skills that we need as a strategic leader, as a thought leader. And these are the global challenges of the 21st century. While we are facing global challenges, we need also to look into the core competencies, digital literacy, critical thinking, and problem solving. And according to Peter Drucker, the best way to predict the future is to create it. But I would like also to give emphasis to Woodrow Wilson, the father of public administration, wherein he said that if you would be leader of men, you must lead your own generation to the next. And with that, now I would like you to just take a look at this 10 commandments for good Philippine public administration. This was written in 1962, and I found this at the Library of Congress. And for me, it's very relevant, and it's very inspirational. And it says here that you really have to devote your time to the government, and I would like to say that it's a privilege to be part of public service, of the government, actually. So these are the 10 commandments. And lastly, I'm down with my last 2 slides, I guess. We argue in this article that leaders can make a difference by developing capacities of themselves and of others and pushing the boundaries of continuous improvement. However, to be sustainable, public sector reforms have to be complemented by reforms of institutions, structures, and procedures, and anchored in behavior, values, and a common vision that is communicated well and owned by all. And all types of leadership assume integrity as a requisite foundation for moral action. So, Hiraya Manawari, that ends my presentation. I think, Miriam, siguro nag-overtime ako ng 10 minutes na. My apologies. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Dean Lazan, for a very comprehensive presentation. To our participants, we will be sending you the link to the presentations once available through your email. And also for our newcomers, kindly type in your name and agency at the chat box for to indicate your attendance. So that will be both at the Google Meet and the YouTube channel. And please also continue to type in your questions at the chat box along with your name and agency for the open forum later. All right, so we now move to our next presenter. Our second presenter is a professional futurist, an educator, a governance and policy consultant, and a risk management and business continuity management professional and thought leader. He is founder, chief futurist, and executive director of the Center for Engaged Foresight, a co-founder and vice president of the Philippines Futures Thinking Society, chair of the Millennium Project Philippines Node Supervising Fellow of the DAP Futures Thinking course, chair of Millennium Project Philippines Note, conference chairperson of the upcoming Asia Pacific Futures Network Futures Conference to be held this month. Regional editor of the Journal of Future Studies, published by the Graduate Institute of Future Studies, Tamkang University, and a business continuity management and risk management consultant at John Clements Consultants. He has collaborated with the best in the futures field in designating transformative and cutting-edge global and local events and projects that integrate foresight, creativity, experimentation, and innovation. He is a full member of the Asia Pacific Foresight Group, organized by CSIRO's Data 61, Australia's leading data innovation group, and co-founder of the Asia Pacific Futures Network. Recently, he was elected as a board of director of the Association of Professional Futurists, a global community of futurists dedicated to promoting professional excellence and demonstrating the value of strategic foresight and future studies for the last 30 years. So now to acquaint us on strategic foresight planning in academic institutions, we give the platform now to Professor Sherman Cruz. Professor Cruz.
Thank you very much, Miriam, and good afternoon to everybody. I hope you had a nice day, and now we will begin with strategic foresight, and I would like to welcome you all. Welcome to the future. This is the part wherein we try to immerse ourselves deeper into futures thinking and strategic foresight in the context of planning, of course, as applied in academic institution. But before we do that, I would like to invite everyone to join me. Let's play a little bit of a game here. Let me just share to you my screen. Okay, let me go to your entire screen. Window, Chrome tab, my entire screen. Let me know if you can see it. I'm going to share my deck. So, okay, can you see my deck now?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. So let's play a game. You know, I assume most of us here know the legend of Rip Van Winkle. But for those who haven't, or perhaps might have forgotten the story of Rip Van Winkle, certainly it's not Bram Stoker's Dracula. So it's Rip Van Winkle, no? But let me refresh everyone here a bit the story of Rip Van Winkle. So the story goes, Rip Van Winkle is an American short story. No, Rip was an easygoing man who spends his time in the village and goes hunting to escape his nagging wife. He was good at helping others, but unfortunately he was inept in helping himself and his family. Now, Rip Van Winkle is not a lazy man. He is good at hunting and fishing and is willing to do things for others. But when it comes to his own land and his family, he always seemed to have a bad luck. No, quite really unfortunate for this fellow. For his wife, he was lazy and really just unable to help his family. Now Rip has a group. No, he has a gang. They are called the town's philosophers. They love to muse a lot about things and stuff. But one day, he and together with his crew went to the mountains and reached the peak and met the spirit of Henry Hudson. You know, Henry Hudson is an English navigator, no, an explorer. Then they had a chat, and after that, you know, Rip and his gang went into a deep slumber. Nakatulog sila ng malalim. At nahimbing ang tulog nila, umabot ng 20 years yung tulog. No, the 20 years, you know, they slept in a deep slumber for the next 20 years. Imagine that if you were Rip Van Winkle. But then he woke up 20 years after and finds that the American Revolution has been won. And he tried to ask for his wife, and they told him that his wife died. Now, this is the game. You know, if you were Rip Van Winkle, who woke up, you know, 20 years after, And imagine you have been asleep for the last 20 years and you know nothing about the brave new world in which you awaken. Somewhat unfairly, you have been asked to guess the current situation of Philippine higher education in 2040. So today's 2020, right? And then you've been sleeping in the last 20 years. You woke up in 2040, and then somebody asks you, perhaps an artificial intelligent being or a robot, for you to guess the current situation of Philippine higher education. Academic institution, let's just say academic institution. But before you can do that, the robot said, the AI being, he said, to be somewhat more fair, before you guess the current situation, I will give you the opportunity to ask one question from me about Philippine higher education 2040. Now, the game is, if you're going to ask the AI, what is your question? Okay, so I believe, here in Meet, we have a chat box, right? So can you think of that one question that you would like to ask the AI, regarding Philippine higher education in the year 2040? What is your question? You just type in your question in the chat box. And I would like the help of Miss Miriam to read the questions. Okay, so we're gonna do this for perhaps a minute or two. Okay, try to think of that question you would like to ask that artificially intelligent being in 2040 about Philippine higher education. So we can start the game now. One question. And then, of course, we're around like 200 people here. So you can just ask that one question in the chat box, and we'll ask Miriam to read this question as they come in. Is that okay, Ms. Miriam?
Yes, sir, of course.
Okay, thank you very much. Once the first question comes in, let's start reading it. I cannot see the chat box because I'm presenting. I'm sorry.
Let's see. So we have the first question: can we be at par with the Ivy League in the US and UK?
Okay, is Philippine higher education at par with the Ivy Leagues? The quality of Ivy League's education. Okay.
How did we get here?
Okay.
What could be the characteristics of students and teachers on year 2040?
Okay.
What kind of graduates do we have now? Can we achieve the so-called quality education in 2040? How did we do it? Do we still need teachers?
Are there teachers in 2040?
Yes. What is the latest innovation in education now? How do you go about teaching the young people today? Are teachers still relevant?
Okay, that's a good question.
How can values be preserved in full digitalization world? Am I still relevant?
Okay.
What would be the characteristics of our educators and learners? Will the teaching profession or teachers still be existing and functioning? What are we now against the targets of higher education? Are teachers still teachers in education? Uso pa ba ang teachers sa panahon 2040?
Okay.
That's a common question there. What might be the landscape of higher education in our country in the year 2040? What do we expect from our graduates with the limitations in the teaching learning process now in the pandemic? Will computers replace teachers? What would be the Philippine education like in terms of innovation? What kind of learners do we have in 2040? How is education being delivered in 2040?
Okay, thank you, Ms. Miriam. I know we can stop on that, but of course, I think you can generate the script here, right? Like the text. I'm not sure if we can do that on Google. Perhaps we can copy that later on, and then perhaps after this webinar, we can look back into those questions that we've been asking. The reason why I ask you to do this is because the question that we ask actually can tells us about the way we perceive the future of higher education. And as I was listening to your question, the main question was about the role and the function of the teacher in the year 2040. The question of relevancy in a highly digitized, education environment by that time. If you try to some sort of imagine what the future could be like, you can actually imagine diverse and different things. But then I would like to point out that futures thinking or strategic foresight is not about prediction. I have not asked you to actually predict the future. What I've asked you is to ask a question with that imaginary AI in the year 2040, and then you started asking the question. The way we perceive and imagine the future, tells us about how we value or perhaps frame the future of education in a future context. Now, the purpose of this game is just to give you a taste of what conversation you will expect if you are in a foresight workshop or you employ anticipatory tools and methodologies. There's basic things that you need to remember in futures thinking and foresight. One, the future does not exist yet. And if the future does not exist yet, there's no such thing as a future data. And if there's no such thing as a future data, of course, it means that the future is basically fundamentally, categorically invisible and not present. And if the future is something that is invisible or something that has not occurred yet, there's no way for us to predict it. To a certain extent, we can predict, for example, the next hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, a day, a week, a year, in 5 years. But then if you try to push it forward, it becomes even more complex, no? You can predict what could occur in the next 50 years, right? Or 30 years. But, however, each and every human being has that natural capacity of foresight, we can predict because it's quite too complex, but we can anticipate possibilities. By asking questions, actually, it gives you the opportunity to anticipate possibilities. So I'm going to discuss that further later on, but just to give you an idea, some sort of a preview of what futures thinking and foresight in planning looks like. This is how it looks like. This is how it is done. And I would like to, just share what Buxminster Fuller once said, that we are called to be the architects of the future, not the victims. But apparently, for organizations and people who does not have the capacity of foresight, who does not have the skill set, to use the future to innovate, they become the victims of the future. This is quite popular. It's like some sort of a hit song. I believe every one of you, I bet, has read the book of Alvin Toffler, The Future Shock. Literally, if a person is unprepared, if a person does not have that foresight capacity, and given the speed of change that are coming from the future, you could be its victim, And now, how do you develop your capacity and capability to be an architect of the future, as Buckminster Fuller stated? There are many ways of doing that. And of course, one of those ways, different types and different ways of doing futures, is strategic foresight. So again, in futures and foresight, the initial step is about revealing what's obvious. and these are the low-hanging fruit. And most of the time, these are informed by trends, by news headlines, by history, and by the things that we are aware of. But then, of course, we don't know everything. Even if we have the capacity and capability to deploy and employ big data, there are certain things that are unknowable, whether we like it or not. And that is why they've said that the future is a pretty quite complex and uncertain place. It is the unknown environment. And then one of this emerging, result of unknowability is the emergence of the COVID-19 virus. However, I'm not saying that not a single institution or person have failed to anticipate this virus, from emerging. Futurists has told us about this in the last 30 years. And some risk managers and business continuity planners have in fact warned many companies about the possibility of another pandemic. But then, of course, what was anticipated was much more complex than what has actually occurred. And in fact, if you are not aware of this, if it remains unknowable to you, these types of existential risks and threats, they become black swans. Black swans are the events and issues that are considered low probability but high impact when they occur. The probability of these events and issues or phenomena from occurring is quite very, very low, that we tend to ignore them. But then we've seen this in the last, 100 years. There had been a pandemic in the past. But then, apparently, because of our blind spot, because of, we've been trapped by short-termism and the inability to develop the capacity of foresight, that we failed to acknowledge and prepare for COVID-19 virus. But let's try to imagine for a bit quickly, if this virus was a mental construct. Imagine if this virus was a mental construct and this pandemic emerges as a social, political, ecological, technological, and cultural phenomenon. This has been my analysis 7 months ago, but apparently now we have COVID-19 is now a social and a cultural phenomenon. It will remain with us. It will remain in us forever, in fact, with or without a vaccine. Now, let's just try to gamify and reframe what this virus means to us. Like, let's just say if this virus was a mental force, a mental thought, if this virus is a worldview, imagine, this virus is not just a public health issue. It has triggered so many different things, including the emergence of what we now call Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter, of course, racism has been there, it's been dormant, but then it came, racial discrimination came back with a vengeance, and this was triggered, in one way or another by the COVID-19 pandemic. So imagine the COVID-19 pandemic or this virus as a deeply ingrained emotion. It's not just a disease that is shaping and urging us to see the possibility of alternative future worlds. As Arundhati Roy once said, perhaps this virus wants us to understand that this is also a portal forcing us to break from the past and imagine the world anew. It is a gateway between one world and the next. If that is the case, what would this virus mean to you? And I would like to ask that question now. Beyond public health in the context of the virus is a disease, but rather the virus reframed in multiple contexts like societal, technological, political, cultural, environmental, and ideational. It could mean a lot of things. And not only that, this virus has changed the way we perceive the future, it had actually influenced the way we experience. From a person's point of view, if this virus had an intention, what do you think are its intentions? It had impacted the way we learn. Surprisingly, for some of the organization, whom I consider academic institutions that are considered anti-fragile. They've been digital all over the years, but then apparently it had disrupted us in so many ways. Now, given the impact that this virus had to our academic institution, let's just place ourselves now here in the context of you being the decision maker and the teacher or the academic. What if this virus could speak to you? What do you think would this virus tell you? If you perhaps try to decrypt, the message of this virus, what does this mean to you or to us? The virus does exist and it will exist forever. It is alive, ever present and felt. The virus is a lived experience. And I would say, in so many ways, it had, disrupted a lot of things, especially those ideas and systems and practices that are pretty quite old. We are now in the period of creative destruction, my friends. And in that, many are innovating, and trying to be the architects of the new future, trying to be the architects of an alternative future world. And because of this virus, it has changed our ways of knowing reality. It has changed our ways of knowing the future. It is no longer something about when we project the future, it's business as usual, or something that the future is imagined as something that's linear. But rather, it had diversified. It changed everything. And according to a colleague, a futurist whose name is Sia Sardar, he actually welcomed us to a post-normal world 10 years ago. He said, all that was normal has evaporated. We have entered the post-normal times, the in-between period where old orthodoxies are dying and new ones have not yet emerged and nothing really makes sense. So how might you be able to have any viable notion of an alternative future world when normality has evaporated? C.S.R. Dar is pretty quite strong on this point. He said that the normal is dead. There's no such thing as a new normal. The next 50 years is the never normal. That is the next 50 years. Colleagues from Singapore, has aptly said and argued that the next 50 years will be the never normal. So it's not just the pandemic or virus that we're talking about here. There will be a lot of issues and events that will, disrupt us even deeper and in many different ways. And these are the things that sustains a post-normality: complexity, chaos, and contradictions. Why are things quite complex now compared to the post or the pre-internet age? Because everybody is connected at this time. No one can escape connectivity. We are all connected in one way or another, but that connectivity is deepened, by, of course, by internet technologies and emerging technologies. That problems and issues are now never local. They have never been local in the last 10 years. It has always been global because we have been truly connected. Imagine the number of people using mobile phones today. Imagine the users of social media at this point. It keeps on growing exponentially. And as access to technology becomes easier and access to emerging technologies become cheaper, the world will be more complex, than today. Imagine what complexity would look like in the next 5 years. Imagine what would chaos look like in the next 10 years. The reason why there is chaos is because other than there is connectivity. It's chaotic because we now live in a network world. Decision making is no longer done or influenced by a particular driver like political. We now live in a world where everybody is aware about systems thinking, right? So it's pretty much quite chaotic because you have to consider a lot of things, in deciding and planning. You cannot, in fact, for the sake of analysis, you cannot, in fact, narrow down your drivers now. If before, knowledge was done and conducted by only considering one or two drivers as your variables, apparently it does not. It couldn't adopt. It limits you to become agile and effective in a world that is truly chaotic. And the reason why there are contradictions at this time is because old ideas are dying and the new ones has not emerged yet or about to emerge. That is the reason why in the post-normal times, you have these three C's of complexity, chaos, and contradictions that will continue to sustain the never normal. And because of that, and since perhaps we do not have the capacity and capability to anticipate the risk, or perhaps not just the risk, anticipate wicked opportunities, not just the wicked problems, but the wicked opportunities that emerge from this complexity, chaos and contradiction that are occurring at this time. If you do not have that capacity, regardless whether your organization is big, small, or mega, you can be disempowered by risk. And if you want to hold on to something that's normal, that seems to be the root of all our ills. And the world, my friends, ladies and gentlemen, is now an uncertain place. And the future is really quite an uncertain place. And I would like to share to you the report from the World Economic Forum that says that these are the top 10 risks over the next 10 years. And then the likelihood of this risk from occurring and disrupting us at the global level, would depend on the capacity of institutions to manage risk. And the nation states and your organization to actually manage this risk. We're all aware of this, but I would like to point out that, of course, there are risks that will certainly become more impactful, in the future. And of course, again, in terms of impact, the impact will be greater in the near future. Like, for example, let's just say one emerging issue is ocean systems collapse. I'm not going to discuss what an ocean system collapse here right now, but I would like to invite you to research the emerging issue of an ocean system collapse. Apparently, as technology advances and we develop the capacity to anticipate existential risk and threats, we will likely receive more information about future pandemics, right? Because we have developed the capacity to, be at least like 10 steps or 100 steps ahead, to anticipate and map when would this, virus could emerge and how would it impact locations and people and economy. Certainly, innovators will find a way to actually anticipate and prepare for future pandemics. And then another one, as you've seen, that there have been pretty quite on a daily basis, wherein NASA reports the possibility of an asteroid impacting the planet, in the near future. So we have, in many ways or another, due to the application of our emerging technologies, and now that we have become more sensitive, to this risk, we'll be able to access all of this data, and the world will get more complex as data becomes available. And of course, that is where risk thinking and risk management becomes a critical and crucial element of strategic foresight. You have to assess your organization, institution, whether or not your capacity and ability to manage risk is low, middle, or high, or perhaps whether or not with a particular risk or crisis could impact your organization severely. But then, as I've said, I would like, of course, for me personally, this is my bias, I would like to see the virus as a portal to a new world, because it gives us the ability to reperceive things and imagine alternatives. We don't have any choice, right? Necessity is the mother of all invention. But then we must be able to develop our capacity to imagine, alternatives, in order for us to intensify and increase our ability to adapt, innovate, digitize will become certainly a critical, crucial element of a foresight-driven organization in the future. Not only the digital aspects, of course. As I've said, foresight is a natural capacity that we all have. But if that it remains undeveloped or unutilized, it remains dormant. No, and of course we will continue to live in a network world. Let us create more friends, my friends, because that is the best way for us to be resilient. By developing positive relations and the networks. And as you develop, that peer-to-peer or collaborative network, as has been emphasized by Dean Lizan, you are able to plan because you'll be able to, by sharing information, by sharing resources, data, whether it's financial, monetary, resources of whatever kind, you'll be able to plan better and strategize more effectively. And of course, while we prepare for the future, we must learn how to pause. I think one of the things that have taught us, what the virus has taught me personally, is to pause. The world has basically in that period of pause, and he has taught us to slow down, right? And many are now saying, including Nicholas Taleb, he said that in order for you to actually be resilient, you need to slow down. You have to learn how to be slow in order for you in order for your organization to heal and reflect, better and emerge as something that is, as Dean Lizan has said, frenetically inclined. Wisdom could only emerge if we learn how to slow down. Wisdom isn't possible if things are too fast. I think that is how I see it. And then we have to learn how to reconnect with self and with our family and with nature. We all know that the reason why we have the pandemic now is because, this has, in many reports, I believe, scientific reports, there are like conspiracy theories out there, but I believe in the scientific view of things. That the reason why we have the pandemic is because, this was a virus that has, shifted, transitioned to a human body. And again, of course, we also need to learn how to breathe. Each and every one of us now has the time to breathe, because if you learn how to breathe, you become more reflective. And if you become more reflective, I think you develop the capacity of really intensifying your ability to actually plan, and of course, meditation is very crucial, and reflection. And we must learn also how to need to rest, and we must continue to stay safe and be sensitive, and of course, have fun, amidst this pandemic. These are the things that we need to consider as a person, because we are also human beings. We're not only acting on behalf of the organization, or we're not just the organization. Even at the organizational level, the organization must learn how to find ways to transcend themselves from trauma. I think each and every one at this point, whether individually and organizationally, are experiencing trauma. And then, of course, in the event that many people are saying now that we need to regenerate, I think even before an organization can recover and regenerate, we must learn how to heal. Now, in that point, the question is, how might we envision our academic institution in an alternative future world? We did a Rip Van Winkle exercise just to give you a preview, a flavor of what foresight means, when you employ the tools and methods in your conversation, planning, strategy development, leadership, and decision-making. Folks, my friends, futures and foresight, the currency of future and foresight is imagination, coupled with data. So if you enter this world, you are actually utilizing two important things: the world of data and the world of perception. That is why foresight is quite critical right now, simply because you're trying to perceive what could emerge from the present, from the future to the present. Because if the organization develops or intensify its capacity and capability to anticipate possibilities, you can actually better plan, for alternatives. Okay. So, but I would like to note here that foresight is not contingency planning. Okay, that's not foresight. Foresight is all about building alternative future worlds. In business as usual scenarios, in collapse scenarios, in continued economic growth scenarios, in outlier scenarios, and in transformational scenarios. You try to imagine the future of your organization in these 4 alternative future worlds. Like, how might my organization look like in the next 30 years in a continued economic growth scenario? Okay, but apparently that is not the present that we have at this point. I don't think that continued economic growth or business as usual scenario could continue in the next 30 years. People are now trying to innovate new types of economies, right? By doing it, not by theorizing on it, but by doing it. There are a lot of innovations going on right now, right? They are in the period of improvisation and experimentation. There are no process into it. There is no regularity in the things that we do. We're just trying to not just survive, but in many organizations and nation states, they want to thrive in the next 30 years. They want to colonize the future. But how? Now, these are the basic questions that I normally ask. How might we navigate better in an increasingly complex, contradictory, and chaotic world? How might we better prepare, respond, mitigate, and manage as well as thrive from the impacts of future existential risks and threats? The World Economic Forum have said 4 things that can make your organization better after COVID-19. One is anticipation. As I've said, anticipation is that natural foresight capacity or capability of a person to anticipate the future and anticipate emergence. When you say anticipate the future, you're just trying to imagine the world that you want. What is the world that I want? What is the world or the future that I want for my university? For my business, for my future. That's anticipation for the future. You're trying to define the future that you like. But then there is another emerging way of doing foresight, which is anticipation for emergence. Just to tell you, this book, it's downloadable for free on the internet. I'm going to share it with Ms. Yami later about the book that I co-published, co-authored. I'm one of the authors. It's a collaborative effort published. It was a project by UNESCO that was published, I think, in 2015. Was recently awarded the most significant futures work in today, this year by the Association of Professional Futurists. If you want to know more about anticipation, download that book. I'm going to share it to you later by the chat box. And then, of course, again, futures literacy. Now, what is futures literacy? Before you can even do foresight, or, of course, anticipation is a natural foresight capacity. It's natural. Each and every one of us has that. Not just human beings, including animals. In fact, they have, to a certain extent, level of anticipatory capacity or capability. But for us, that could be enhanced and amplified because we do have the capability to anticipate the next 1,000 years. Now, however, in order for you to actually anticipate better, you need to develop the skill set. When you use the word futures literacy means the capacity and capability to use the future to innovate today. To use the future as an asset, a resource, and a tool that you can use today to change, the way we perceive the future. Because apparently, of course, even in planning, like when we do strategic planning, it's not actually, strategic planning is not long term. Strategic planning is 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. In fact, the difference between strategic planning and foresight is that foresight goes beyond 30 years. They can go as far as millions of years. Depende kung ano yung pinag-aaralan. Like NASA, they do foresight, but they calculate human civilizational features for millions of years. you're talking about galaxies, di ba? Ganyan ang ano nila, perspective nila. Pero for organizations, when you say strategic planning, the max for strategic planning is 30 years. So, but you can actually use foresight, to help you create more meaningful plans and strategies. But then again, it is very crucial that when you do futures and foresight, you have to embed systems thinking into your process. Everybody, all of the people who are involved in strategic planning must also be aware and have the capacity to think in network forms. Because each and every driver of change affects each other. It's no longer political only, economic only, technology only. You have to develop the capacity to be able to make sense of all these multiple drivers of change. And of course, when you use the word strategic foresight, that is where you apply futures literacy, futures thinking, and anticipation at an organizational level. That is where futures is applied in processes, in systems, in institutions, in planning, in decision-making, and leadership. Futures thinking applied simply means strategic foresight. And that is what the World Economic Forum is trying to convey now, that the 4 skills that each and every one of us must have in order for us to create better organizations and better versions of us, we must learn these 4 things. And if you have that capacity, it gives you the ability to become anti-fragile. Of course, sustainability has been there in the last 30 years. And apparently, being resilient is not enough, with crises and threats that are existential in nature. What Nicholas Taleb, the author of the book Anti-Fragility, is saying now, that when we are faced with black swan events like the COVID-19 pandemic, or some have said that it's not really like a black swan event, the organization must be anti-fragile. The organization, anti-fragility means the capacity of the systems to thrive in times of crisis. Resiliency is the ability to bounce back. It does not necessarily mean that you are that you can thrive in crisis. Ability to bounce back, it will take time. But then some organization like Amazon, who are really highly digitized, they're the type of organizations that are profiting, from crisis. So you have to ask yourself, how might I make my organization anti-fragile? And one of those ways is to be anticipatory, to develop a system and process within your organization and decision-making processes anticipatory. Now, this is the framework that I've been using in the last, for almost a decade now. This has been applied at the UN level, in smart cities in the US, in different types of organization, from civic to high-level conversation. This is the framework. How do you do anticipation in futures and foresight in strategic planning and organizational change and development? The first thing that you need to do is you have to undefine the future. Now, how do you undefine the future? You have to question it. But like what we did in the Rip Van Winkle exercise, that's the point of it. Question the future by asking questions. Because it gives you the ability to initially perceive and reveal the current imaginings about the future. These questions might not necessarily be there are no right and wrong questions, but we must learn how to ask the tough questions. We must learn how to ask the big questions. But of course, the first stage is you must undefine the future. There are official visions of the future, but of course, it does not necessarily mean that that is the future, because somebody else is telling you what the future is like instead of you trying to define it for your organization. But I'm not saying that we have to ignore the data and these things, but then the intent really is to bring back the power to the agency, to the person in the organization who are who does have their own view of the future. But even before you can actually do that, you have to undefine the future. Now, the next, once you have undefined the future, perhaps you want to define it or undefine it, that is where developing anticipatory capacity comes in. In order for you to actually do foresight, you must learn the tools and the methods, tried and tested tools and methods, of foresight. If you learn how to apply these tools, it means that your organization or your leadership has that anticipatory capacity. The capacity can only be achieved when you have this level of capacity to apply anticipatory processes and systems. And then, of course, these anticipatory systems and tools enable you to imagine emergent future worlds. No, like how might the future of Philippine higher education look like? No, in a, let's just say, in a transformation scenario by the year 2040. When you say transformation, that is a scenario wherein the things that does not exist now exist in the future. That's transformation. Otherwise, it is not. No, the things that does not exist now exist in the future. Of course, when we plan, some things might exist now, but we just want to like some sort of sustain these gains. But then in futures and foresight, it pushes you further to think beyond sustainability. It pushes you to think. It pushes you towards transformation. And transformation is actually about making things happen that does not exist yet. Now, once you have these imaginings about preferred and emergent future worlds, how are you going to do that? How might you be able to achieve these scenarios of alternative future? That's where you must learn how to backcast the future to create meaningful plans and strategies. I'm going to give you some examples later on. The point really of futures and foresight is to link the future with the present. You have to remember that the future, like the past, is something that we experience now. No, the future is something like the past that is always present. It's not like it's too far away. Right? The only difference is that we can actually codify the past. We can create data out of the past, right? And try to extrapolate this data into the future. That's forecasting. But then, in the context of foresight, it's another thing. You try to some sort of, if a data does not exist yet, you try to imagine plausible data of the future, and ask the question, how might be able to achieve these targets and data, which is basically planning. But then the point in planning is that you try to develop meaningful strategies and actions. However, when you apply foresight, when you do strategic planning informed and driven by foresight, it could open a lot of multiple possibilities and scenarios that wouldn't limit you, in the way you plan the future. And another one, just to point out the difference between strategic planning as a discipline and strategic foresight as a discipline, is that in strategic planning, it does have a tendency to close the future. Right? That has always been the focus of strategic planning. Right? You try to close it. This is the plan, you approve it. Right? You put budget into it, and you just like some sort of execute it, implement it as if the plan is something that is set in stone, informed by similar drivers and indicators and metrics. Now, in strategic foresight is that you don't close the future or colonize the future, but rather when you use foresight, you try to open the future and try to anticipate and explore multiple possibilities. And it will give you a wide array, of possibilities when you start opening up the imagination, informed, of course, supported by data. That could transform the way you do strategic planning. Again, just to present to you in a more easier way is, of course, the reason why you ask and define the future from the beginning is that you question the assumptions. Why do we think the future as like what we've been thinking about it now? Like why do we think the future as this and not as that? You try to question the assumptions. Like kanina, diba? And Rip Van Winkle, will teachers still be relevant in the year 2040? Yeah. You try to think, that's the assumption in the form of a question. If you say yes, how? If you say no, how might you be able to prevent that from actually making teachers irrelevant into the future? Now, by using Foresight tools and methods, it gives you the ability, the avenue to actually like explore and see the possibilities. of how the future, of how teachers, can be relevant or be more irrelevant or more irrelevant. So you try to explore both the positive and the negative by reimagining it. Because these anticipatory tools and methods enables you to reimagine and rethink and recreate what teaching could look like in the year 2040. And then once you've seen it and explored, what the university could look like in the next 30 or 40 years, that's where you try to reflect and discern. Now, how might I be able to turn this exploration or anticipation into something that I can create at this time? That's where planning and strategy development comes in. Now, this is the action planning journey for a foresight work, or foresight, a strategic planning informed by foresight. So again, reveal phase, you try to explore, reveal those things that are obvious, the low-hanging fruit. And once you're done with that, you try to reframe this low-hanging fruit, like what innovators has been doing, like companies like Google or Apple. They've been trying to create new spin into old stuff. There's nothing really unique, authentic, or novel in what they do, but they just try to build on what's existing and try to recreate and reframe that. With the technology having to evolve with having different functions and purposes. And then once the future is reframed or reimagined, you start creating pathways. How might I do things differently today in order for me to achieve that future? Because if you try to envision an alternative future world or a transformative future, the indicators and the metrics that you've been using in the last 5 years won't work. A new type of future or a new type of imagining would require new metrics, new indicators, new strategies, and new types of leadership. Otherwise, history will repeat itself. So, and then of course, once the pathways are created, decision-making comes in. That's where you try to consolidate the insights and next steps. Amplify the insights, discern how to link foresight, the long-term view to Monday morning questions. Like for example, nakita ko, that the future, for example, let's just say that the future of universities in the future is that where you will have professors as global knowledge entrepreneurs. Have you tried to imagine the future of professors as global knowledge entrepreneurs? A future wherein they don't need to beg for money, that they are not limited by the budget that are given to them, by the resources, provided by the state. But rather, if in a future, in an alternative future world wherein learning becomes self-generating, let's just say in the year 2040, I would say, if I try to imagine it, I would like to imagine a transformational view of a professorship as the professor as something who are, leading in global knowledge entrepreneurship. They no longer teach, but rather they are knowledge entrepreneurs. And then of course, just want to give you an example. In Malaysia, they've been doing higher education university foresight since in the last 50 years. But recently, a colleague did a foresight work for Malaysian universities. They started in 2005, and in fact, one of the envisioned future back then in 2005 was virtual learning. Nakita na nila yun eh. They've seen it, and they shifted. In fact, they have invested capacities and capabilities in terms of system. That is why yung mga universities in Malaysia, they're not really impacted in terms of education delivery, because they've been able to establish digital learning in the last 7 years. So the impact of crisis has been soft, and in fact, even if you try to look at how they handle the COVID-19 pandemic, they're pretty quite resilient. They are in fact thriving like Thailand, and Vietnam. So another one is, of course, this is how you do strategic foresight and planning. You start, in planning, kasi if you do strategic planning using foresight becomes the precursor to strategic planning, not the other way around. Before you embark into strategic planning work, you have to do your foresight work. You have to identify your shared visions. You have to identify your preferred future. You have to know what's emerging, what's the emerging issue, and think in terms of long-term. In strategic planning, the way we do strategic planning, it's never been long-term driven. It's much more informed by short-termism. And we have to break away from that path of short-termism. How do you do that? You capacitate your institution with anticipatory capability by identifying your preferred future. Now, if I'm going to ask you now, what is the preferred future of your university in a post-pandemic scenario? Let's just say in the year 2030. How do you envision your universities by that time? Of course, you need to have a conversation. This cannot be done by one person or 5 person. It has to be participatory. Involve all your stakeholders, including students. Because they will be the future clients. By that time, they are no longer students. So it's good that you involve all stakeholders from the board, to the senior leaders, to the middle level, including teachers, both the senior and junior and students. Everybody must have a stake. Everybody should be a part in the process of identifying the preferred future and what's long-term for the organization. Then when that's identified, that's vivid and clear, you do strategic planning. You try to create the strategies, the pathways that will enable you to create the future preferred. But then, of course, other than strategic, you have the tactical approach, the resources. What are the resources you need? What are the, those kinds of things. And then, of course, there you also have this daily basis wherein, of course, decision-making is done, resolutions are done, crisis management, so forth, so on an operational scale. So, but then all of this should be anchored in the long term. The difference is that, of course, there are studies, I wouldn't want to discuss this right now because I only have a limited time, is that there is a big difference between an organization doing strategic planning when you compare them to a non-future literate organization. In Japan, they did that. They studied that in the last 5 years. The difference between a future literate organization or a future informed strategic planning and not. And it will surprise you that there is a lot of difference. Ang nangyari is yung nag-strategic planning na walang foresight, paulit-ulit lang yung ginagawa. It is problem-centric. It is fighting fires. Now, for an organization that is foresight-driven, it's beyond fighting fires. They acknowledge that, but then they are more innovative. They know how to navigate the future. They are far more innovative because when you innovate, things becomes more cheaper instead of buying, trying to purchase an idea. Purchasing an idea is quite expensive. That's why you have Asian development bank loans and loans, because they're trying to some sort of sell you this idea. We're going to give you the money to actually enforce it. But then innovative organizations like startups, for example, can actually thrive with a minimal budget. That's what Google call moonshot thinking. And then of course, how do you do strategic foresight maturity? You can actually, what you can do is that when you begin integration of foresight, you have to some sort of assess the maturity of the organization. Is the organization naive? Is it aware? Is foresight practice defined? Is it well managed, or is it now enabled? These are the maturity index, and then there are ways by which you can actually assess the capacity of your organization, assess the strategic foresight maturity of your organization. And just to give you an example, NATO has been doing this in the last 30 years. Strategic foresight, and of course the military has been doing that. And just recently, they issued report about the alternative futures world. What this report is telling us is that bioterrorism will be one of the massive drivers, disruption of a post-pandemic world. Yung bioterrorism, hindi pa natin, may mga sectors na sa Pilipinas na pinag-aaralan yan, but we haven't really actually invested enough time yet to identify, make our nation state resilience to bioterrorism. In fact, a colleague, Swahili Nayatula, is one of the best, said that the Philippines is one of the most vulnerable to bioterror events. So that is something that we need to look into. And then, of course, Asian Development Bank has been funding developing economies, and how to apply the future or future studies and foresight in policy dialogues. And of course, you can actually download this for free. futures thinking in Asia and the Pacific, why foresight matters for policymakers. In fact, they will be having a session at the Asia Pacific Futures Network hosted by the Philippine Futures Thinking Society in November. So we will be sharing you the link if you are interested, to join the Futures Summit this November. It is hosted by Manila, virtually. So we're expecting like around a massive number of futurists coming in, including non-futurists and experts in their own respective fields. There will be a lot of things that will be going on there. There will be a conversation on the future of education, basic and tertiary, and many things. I'm going to share to you the website later on. If you are interested, you can register. It's quite minimal. You only have to pay 1,250 to join the summit. You'll be able to access all the events and the lectures and the plenaries and the workshops. There will be workshops from November 19 to 21 for 1,250. You have at least like around the top 10 futurists in the world speaking, and the inventors of the tools, providing the workshops. So again, of course, we don't have a Foresight Institute yet in the Philippines, but they have that in Singapore, in Brunei recently, in Malaysia. And in fact, many will emerge, and hopefully in the near future, since we do have the Senate Futures Thinking Committee, they're actually contemplating of setting up one. So, and then of course, these are the things that I've been doing all across over Asia. And then one of the projects that I have is for Indonesia, trying to like some sort of, for them, to experience the journey of, how might you be able to like embed and integrate foresight in the policy making and planning process. As you've seen here, what we did is to explore the future of disaster management, for the West Java province that has like around 50 million people with many villages and cities, like they have around 9 cities. And they tried to envision a disaster management system with an AI capability. And when they presented this to the governor, I think they now plan to set up like around 22 artificially intelligent emergency management system for West Java. And then of course, the fundings comes next. And then some folks at the World Bank, consultants were there, to help them like try to figure out how to source the funding and support. And of course, for the UNFCCC, I was a part of the United Nations framework for climate change in their foresight work. What they did is, to anticipate, explore the future where in the global temperature will be 2 degrees, 1.5 to 2 degrees by the year 2040. So have you tried to like imagine your organization? How might your organization adapt and become agile in a world wherein the global temperature is 1.5 to 2 degrees Celsius? What kind of educational delivery system you might have? What technology interventions that you need to develop now? So there were like around 100 visionaries that were invited by the United Nations to be a part of this, and we designed the process for them. And now the UNFCCC has a policy vision. It's called the Resilience Frontiers, and they also created some pathways. This project is like 2 years. It started in 2019. It's still ongoing until now. But then, of course, the implementation year will be 2023, up to 2030. What they've been trying to push really is to increase the funding for adaptation programs and projects, because we've invested so much in mitigation. But apparently, big data is saying, and the trend is actually saying that global temperatures could hit 2 degrees. It could even earlier by 2040 or 2050. So these are the anticipations that they have. And what kind of technologies can we use, to mitigate the impact, and at least, in one way or another, create the new business as usual. And then, of course, for the United Arab Emirates, the Dubai group will be at the Asia Pacific Futures Network Conference. They will be sharing, how they do futures in Dubai. So they've been saying, as I've said, imagination is a commodity of the future. And in fact, I remember Albert Einstein once said that the highest form of knowledge is actually imagination. So now we are in a world, especially now that the pandemic hit us, you will see that there will be more disciplines and programs who will invest time and money, to do imagination literacy. And that is how they do foresight, right, for the Dubai ministry. And of course, just to give you an output how it would look like if you will do foresight in the context of planning, Dean Lizan and I has a current ongoing project where we are training at least like around 28 14 to 20 US smart cities, like Los Angeles, Las Vegas. They're pretty quite curious, how might the future of smart cities look like in a post-pandemic world? And apparently for the existing programs on smart cities, there's no such thing as this. So we developed a design for them, for our partner, which is the Cities Today Institute in the East West Leadership Academy. We developed a methodology and design that could help them, imagine the future of smart cities by the year 2035, 2040, 2025, and 2030. So we gamified the approach, so it won't be the usual way of planning. You have to gamify it. It has to be fun, because when people are having fun, that's where insight emerges. If people are overwhelmed by information, insight isn't possible. Aha moment is pretty quite impossible when people are overwhelmed by information. So we don't actually talk about information here. What we've been trying to do is like to place them in a situation wherein they use their imagination to think creatively and then try to innovate from that. So just to give you one example, is that what they're saying now in the US is that we are now moving into a world wherein everything becomes AI, driven by AI and robotics. Now, one of the strategies that they have in mind is that why don't we put up AI excellence centers? Why don't we put up AI centers, schools where people and kids can learn the basics and foundation of artificial intelligence literacy? Okay? So, yeah, and then just to give you an example, I think I'm about to finish here. So these are the example of the organizations that has been doing strategic planning at the university context. And I believe, this has been mentioned by Dean Lizan already. These are the things that are going on right now as far as futures literacy in the Philippines is concerned. And this is the Regenerating Asia conference that we'll have on November 19 and 21 in collaboration with ADB and the top future schools in the world, helping us out imagine a regenerative Asia by 2050. Like, for example, now the question of, how might a regenerative university look like for your school in the year 2030 or 2025? It's up to you. But then, of course, this is if you want to know more about it, apfnhiraya.com. You can go there, and that's it for me, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Cruz. It was a very enlightening presentation that you did. And it seems that you had spurred some interest from some of our participants. They would like to know more about Foresight. And so you will perhaps you can provide your contact details later, or they can actually access your website at the Center for Engaged Foresight. Now, before we proceed to our open forum, we will have a 3-minute break. So you can, to our participants, you can still continue to type in your questions at the chat box. So we'll see you after 3 minutes. All right, so welcome back. So we'll be proceeding now to our open forum. So a number of questions have been posted both at the Google Meet chat and the YouTube channel, where we had a peak of 370 viewers at the YouTube channel, and of course 250 is the max for the Google Meet. So perhaps I would like to start with Dean Lizan for the first question. So there's a question here from Anita Presto of Vegan National High School. And what are the leadership tools that are applicable, especially in transforming the organization into a more functional and better performer? And perhaps we can add here another question or a similar question from TESDA Provincial Office, which was posted in YouTube. The same leadership tools and perhaps in the context of the new normal. So Dean Lizan, what would be your response to this?
Okay, so that is basically what are the leadership tools, no, that we can incorporate. Well, basically, I'd like to emphasize again, no, that leadership is based on context, but changing mindset is one important thing, no, and looking into the culture of the organization is another thing. As mentioned in one of our discussions, culture is deliberate. So we can basically design culture in our organization, and that is included in leadership style. And regarding competencies, no, or tools, set skills, we can incorporate the continuous capacity building of our employees, no, of our teammates, of our frontline personnel. So I would like to emphasize that in leadership alone, as I mentioned earlier, leadership alone is not an answer, no, to the complexities in our organization. So there in leadership, we have to include changing of mindset, no, values and paradigms. Secondly, the processes, no, systems, as well as communication, no, communication, and then participation. And to add to that, we need to have a continuous capacity building, and included in that continuous capacity building for the 21st century are the skills on futures thinking, foresight, no, anticipation, and systems thinking. And also, we have to take into consideration to institutionalize imagination. Imagination is very important in an organization in order for us to introduce innovations and agility. So we can only create, no, the future that we want in our organization if we institutionalize imagination. We have to really squeeze, no, our creative juices in order for us to be you know uh, to move forward, from the traditional way of doing things to a more innovative way. And we can also incorporate Kaizen, no? Kaizen, that's a management principle, a leadership principle also, wherein we introduce continuous improvement in an organization. But I think the to top it all, no, it must be ethics and values, wherein we decide towards common good. So I hope I answered that question of yours, ma'am.
Okay, thank you for that, Dean. So this is for Professor Cruz. This is a question from the YouTube channel from Noor Hussein of DepEd Dipolog City. In strategic foresight, is it necessary to consider the value system?
Oh yes, definitely, right? Especially in the reframing phase. There's a tool in strategic foresight that we use called causal layered analysis. The CLA analysis enables people in organization to integrate different types and multiple types of data, from the news headline, to quantitative data, and then including worldviews that justifies and legitimates that are used, to interpret data. Of course, we all know that data is not neutral, right? It's always informed by our values, whether we like it or not. innovations, scientific achievements, they're always informed by a particular value or data. Now, like for example, indigenous belief systems or worldviews, that can be incorporated, in a foresight conversation because you bring your experiences with you. In fact, for foresight conversation, you bring your agency with you. You don't left something out. All your biases and your preferences, you have to bring it with you. It has to come out, in a foresight conversation. So, and of course, one particular value that is apparently, Asian is one non-negotiable value in futuring is family. So how can you bring in, a family conversation into strategic planning? Do we bring this conversation into our strategic planning? Apparently not, because we are only focused on the organization. It's not human-centric in mostly, in the traditional practice. But in foresight, family is a negotiable value. Family is something that has to emerge in planning conversations. And for Asians, that has always been the case.
Okay, thank you. This question is for Dean Lezan from Eric John Marmol of Philippine Science High School, Eastern Visayas Campus. These is actually two questions somehow connected. How do you assess the potential risk and failures of proposed strategic innovations for organization? And how would you assess the effectiveness of these innovations in organizations in the perspective of a strategic, adaptive, and collaborative leader?
Miriam, how to assess, again, can you repeat the question, how to assess the
potential risk and failures and then the
risks.
effectiveness?
Okay, I think Sherman can answer that. No, he mentioned about risk assessment. Basically, in an organization, you have to design your on how are your indicators on how to assess risks. So that will basically depend on the organization. No, what are your goals, and then vis-a-vis you have to look at that. No, your goals, and then the risks of your targets. Yeah, I think Sherman can do that. No, Sherman, can you answer that on risk assessment?
Yeah, sorry, what was the question again?
Potential risk and failures of innovations, and how would you assess the effectiveness of the innovations in the perspective of adaptive and collaborative leadership?
Yeah, innovations is tested when you apply it. That's the best way for you to measure an innovative idea. Its applicability. Of course, that can be assessed. We have to remember that innovation is improvisation and experimentation. That is something new, because when you innovate something new, that is pretty quite not structured or institutional, that is something disruptive also within organizations. But then, of course, there are right way of innovating things, and we have to remember that when we innovate, the process is always iterative. It's learning by doing it, and as you test it, it gets better in the process.
Yeah, and in addition to that, in innovation, when it works, it's already obsolete. No? So innovation is a continuous process. No? And how to assess that is really if it works, then that's okay. But again, how are you going to sustain innovation? Kasi it's a continuous process in Japanese principle, like Kaizen, for example. No, Kaizen is continuous improvement, and it talks about innovation. And in assessing innovation, they have to take into consideration also the total quality of that type of innovation. But what's important really that in that in introducing innovations, the next step is really how to sustain that. Because if that thing that you innovate will stop, then I think that's it's failure. It's that's the end of that. No, but if you see the continuous in introduction of the next level of innovating things, I think that's a one factor that we can consider that innovation is a success. Yeah, so again, go back to that as mentioned by Sherman. It's a continuous process.
Yeah, and in addition to that, just a quick point. There's a difference between a design thinking driven innovation and a foresight or futures thinking informed innovation. When you use futures and foresight, you innovate from the future. Kasi in design thinking, when you innovate, it is problem centric. Di ba? You try to redo or reinvent the process in order for you to reduce the cost, increase productivity, so forth and so on. So it is functional driven and design thinking. Pero in futures and foresight, you try to innovate something that has been not tested yet or does not exist yet. And one of the methods in futures thinking that Google use, in fact, this is something that everybody must learn, yung tinatawag nilang moonshot thinking. You try to innovate an idea that is less costly with 10 times more impact. How are you going to do that? If you're faced with a focal concern, for example, of water, and then the issue is, trying to figure out how to make water accessible and available in the year 2030. What kind of technology are you going to develop? That's the question now. And yung moonshot thinking, it is a process that can help you develop, do just that. Less costly, cheap types of innovations with 10 times more impact. You're placed with a positive problem. It's not a problem about water, but a positive problem on how might you be able to make futures water accessible and available by the year 2030.
Okay, thank you. So for this question, I think this would be delving more on the foresight process. This is a question from the YouTube channel from Raquel Diaz, a school principal from Talabuta Norte National High School. What is the best plan that we can do when things are uncertain?
The best plan is to plan for uncertainty. I think that's the best plan, is to plan for uncertainty. And a foresight gives you the capacity and capability to plan for the unexpected. Because we've always been planning for the business as usual, like growth, increase in the number of students, increase in income, so forth and so on. What if, if the age of growth has ended, that you can no longer increase? Then the question is, how might you be able to transform the organization with a decreasing number of those students? So, of course, it gives you the situation to think and reflect. Paano kaya? So, yun yung foresight. So, you try to figure out how. No one has the right answer and the correct answer, but the purpose really is to explore how.
Okay, this is for... Yes? Okay, so this is for Dean Lazan from Marife Daga of Leyte Normal University. What management projections are considered strategic and acceptable in relation to financial planning and control?
What
management projections?
What management projection are related to financial planning? Well, post the corp, right? So that's a management principle, where you plan, you organize, and then the budget consideration is the last part of it. Because in innovation, if you always consider budget as the first consideration, you cannot introduce innovation, no. But when it comes to planning, what financial consideration, you always have to tie that up to your vision, actually. when you do financial planning. Um, it's a bit hard if you cannot tie that up with your vision and with your societal purpose. Always, no, because you are not only looking at the productivity, at the what do you mean this, at the profit level, no. So you have to strike the balance when you do financial projection. You have to strike the balance on your like for example on the development part, no, of a project or a program. Because if alone you have to consider financial um, as an independent indicator, then you'll not be very successful in achieving your societal purpose. So I think striking the balance is very important in management and financial planning.
Okay, thank you, Dean Lizan. This question is from Christian Voltaire Metin from DepEd Oriental Mindoro. This is for Professor Cruz. In this kind of backcasting framework in planning or decision making or policy making process in an organization, do we already have concrete results and successful experiences of its fruition as implemented?
Oh, yes. 30 to 50 years of evidence, that not just backcasting, but foresight work. Even in corporations, there is a study that's been conducted in Europe that when an organization embeds and integrate foresight into its processes, it leads to an increase of 20 to 30% profitability. You're talking to Fortune 500 companies. And because of that, they've started creating features and foresight unit within their organizations. It doesn't have to be big. You can assign a features focal person within your organization and let them study it, and then try to figure out how to embed and integrate it. Diba? So, but it is a fact that in the last couple of decades, there has been a significant evidence, of wherein when foresight and anticipatory tools and methods like scenario planning and backcasting are applied to strategic planning, increases the profitability of the organization.
Okay, thank you. This is for Dean Lazan, perhaps, from Lawrence Madriaga of Philippine Science High School main campus. The challenge with continuous improvement is that we introduce changes that may inevitably put people out of their comfort zone, which may lead to resistance. Do you have any tips in countering this?
Yeah, I know how hard it is, but first you have to change the mindset. Behavioral the aspect na behavioral yung pag-introduce ng change and innovation. Kasi pag hindi mo i-prep yung mind that there will be changes, then there will be resistance as always. You want to be in your comfort zone at all times. But leadership matters. It really depends on the leader. If the leader is there to really direct the team to embrace innovation and to embrace the change, I think the entire team will agree on that. And if they see that there are already changes, and that changes are for the common good, they will embrace that. I've experienced that several times, and that changing of mindset, and prepping the minds are a really effective tool, to introduce innovations. And if they see that the change is really genuine, and it's really towards the common good, they will embrace that. I don't believe na walang pag-asa, meron talaga, meron. It will really depend on the leadership lang talaga, and if you embrace frenetic leadership principles, for example, seeing goodness in others, and you work as a team, and that there's no I but we, if we embrace that esprit de corps principle, the change will just come, and you'll be surprised. You'll be surprised with the innovations that are coming in in the organization. In the cases that have been presented under Frenetic Leadership Framework, it's a long process though. It's a long process, but they were able to introduce changes. These changes and the introduction of innovations were manifested in so many cases, and I can say na successful siya. And we can do that here in the Philippines as well. And I think it's in many organizations, andyan, no? Ang dami, madami. So it really depends on leadership. Kaya it's very important that that the leader should embrace, no, should embrace change, and should you. Thank you.
All right. So also in relation to comfort zone, I noticed there was a question just now at the chat from June Kunanan. How can the education sector maximize the strengths and benefits of foresight programs, which will require embracing levels of risk and certainty outside their usual comfort zone? I think this is for Professor Cruz.
Yeah, first things first, capacity building. It starts with capacity building. And then once people have the ability or capacity to apply and learn and apply anticipatory tools and methods, that's where you try to figure out how you want to employ, future tools and methods. It can be applied in different ways. If you want to like some sort of integrate and embed it in your strategic planning processes, that is where you can maximize futures thinking. I think amplification and maximization of any idea or tool depends on how you apply it. So yeah, because I think that's the only way for you to actually do it. Learn it. It's all about learning by doing it. And by doing it, you maximize things. yeah, of course.
Okay. All right, thank you. So we have a lot of wonderful questions here, but we are short of time. So I'll just ask our resource persons to give advice as a last statement to our participants. Let's start with you, Professor Cruz. What would you advise right now to our participants from the education sector with regards foresight?
Yeah. Sometimes, futurists are called the uncertainty therapists, because they are now moving into a pretty quite uncertain world. We know that. And this uncertainty has been deepened and made it more chaotic by the pandemic that we're facing at the moment. And let's use this time to explore new possibilities and create the future that we want through foresight. That's why we always say in the Philippine Futures Thinking Society, yung tinatawag naming Hiraya Foresight. To ignite each and every Filipino's dreams, hopes, and aspiration. So through the power of foresight. I want to emphasize this, that futures and foresight is not the solution. Futures and foresight is human-centric, diba? It is even nature-centric, beyond human. So, let's capacitate in ourselves and build capabilities of anticipatory capacity in order for us to explore the wicked opportunities ahead of us and learn how to thrive in the period of pandemic. This pandemic may last. It will be there, I think, I assume. I'm not predicting in the next 5 years. So let's put that in mind, and as we proceed into the future, we learn and experiment on how to do futures and foresight in our organizations. I think really, there is a tsunami of change and application of futures and foresight right now all over the world. You don't want others shaping the official vision for you. I think the future is local and diverse, and this is a good opportunity for us to leapfrog and not catch up. We've always been trying to catch up. Catching up is expensive. Let's innovate and leapfrog by using foresight.
Okay, thank you for that. Dean Lizan, any advice for our participants from the education sector?
Yeah. At the end of the day, no, leadership is very important. No matter how many tools, no, we have, and training programs, no, and capacity building. I think our relationship with each other is very important, and that is through leadership. No, I'm not saying that only one person is considered as a leader. We are all leaders in this organization, especially in the education sector. We are models of our future generation. And I would like you to really embrace the abilities of a frenetic leader, wherein we emphasize our ethics and values, no, ethical ethical decision making, and also our intergenerational responsibility. It's at the end of the day, values, no, and culture are important elements in leadership. So if we can further spread phronesis, no, if we can further see goodness in others, that's a very good thing, or it's that's a very good step, no, to take, so that we can create a community, no, a community of people exercising goodness. And always in our lessons, no, we have to inject values, no, inject values, our culture, the soft power, no, the soft power, really, we have to strengthen that, no. And ano ba tong soft power na to? The soft power, it's about our culture, it's about our Filipino values. We have to ignite that. And whatever, no, frameworks, leadership and management tools that we learn from other countries, we always have to contextualize that. Contextualized by embedding our culture, our values, no, like what the Japanese leaders are doing. No, they got TQM, no, the management principles, but they contextualize that within their culture, and they provide practical um, uh, tools, no, that they can use that in their everyday life. So it's not only being used in the organization, but also outside. That's why they have the so-called kata, no, the moral excellence way of doing things. And we need that, no, to strengthen our soft power. And soft power can bring us to the international arena. It can make us really the ace, no, we can compete, we can be competitive if we use soft power. And you know Korea is doing that, no, the samgyeopsal, the K-pop model, what else, the K-drama. This is about their soft power. And they had this scenario building 20 years ago, no, and this is the result. So we can direct our path towards strengthening our soft power by embedding culture, values, and ethics now. And we have to ignite our that Hiraya foresight that we are talking about, ni Shormon, no. So it's really about changing mindsets, no, and embracing change with yung genuine talaga, no, genuine para sa inang bayan, and for the future generation. Kaya we emphasize also yung intergenerational responsibility po natin, and that's very important in the education sector. Yes, I think I said a lot. Sorry for that, Miriam.
Okay, thank you, Dean Lisan. So that ends our open forum, and thank you to our speakers again this afternoon, Dean Lisan and Professor Cruz. So may I now request everybody at the Google Meet to turn on their video camera for our class picture. So we also recognize our participants at the YouTube channel, and we do hope that in our future webinars, you will be able to join us at the platform, the Google Meet or Zoom platform, or whatever platform you'll be using. All right, so all smiles now to the camera. So let's see. Okay. 1, 2, and 3. Okay, let's have one more.
Okay.
1, 2, and 3. All right. Thank you very much to our dear participants for your enthusiasm this afternoon, and also for our speakers for sharing their knowledge and expertise to
Ba't hindi
us.
nakita yung picture ko dito?
So, at the end of this session, we would like to remind our participants to accomplish a feedback form that will be flashed on the screen in a while, and also will be typed in at the chat box by our chat box monitors.
Thank you po.
All right, so see you all on our next webinar session, which was scheduled on November 13, 2020. This is entitled Nurturing Wellness for Increased Organizational Performance. This will be delivered by Dr. Lorelai Binluan, Associate Professor of the University of the Philippines, Diliman. We will be sending you the link to this webinar session to your respective email addresses at least a day before the event. And again, we are reminding you to accomplish the feedback form after you leave the platform. Your feedback will be valuable to us in improving the delivery of this webinar series, and we will also be using this to validate your attendance. It was a pleasure hosting you this afternoon. We look forward to meeting you all next week for webinar 2 for Smile. All right, God bless us all.
Ako, tinanggal na.
Alam mo, siya, wala naman good siya. Ano na, oo, kaya nag-out naman ko. Hindi mo naman ano ang mga retrieve ang mga messages.